While I was under anesthesia getting life-saving surgery, the man I trusted as my best friend was walking down the aisle with my fiancée. They didn't think I'd make it. And if I had woken up any later, I might have believed the lie they planned to tell me. But the universe has a funny way of handing you your own heartbeat back when you're least ready for it. The doctors finished early. I woke up in recovery, groggy, confused, weak but alive. That's when the nurse whispered, "Your wife came by, but she didn't stay long." That word, wife, rattled around in my head like loose change in an empty jar. I wasn't married. I asked for my phone. She hesitated. "They said not to give it to you yet," she muttered, but I insisted. As soon as she placed it in my hand, I opened the screen, and there it was. The first photo. A blurred shot of Sophia. In white, laughing under a floral arch. Darren, my best friend, my best man, standing beside her, holding her hand, beaming. They weren't just standing together. They were the ones getting married. My vision didn't blur. My throat didn't close. I just stared. My finger swiped to the next image. The caption, #finally forever. The date and time, the same hour. My heart was being cut open to save my life. And that's when I remembered Darren was the one who signed me in for surgery. He was the one who told me not to postpone it, that everything was arranged. "Don't worry about anything," he'd said. "I'll handle it all." I trusted him like a brother. And while I was lying unconscious with IVs in my veins, he was slipping a ring on Sophia's finger. But here's the part that made me smile, because I remembered one more thing. 3 weeks before the surgery, Sophia had gone to meet Ryan, her ex-client, she said. It was just a consult, nothing serious. I had a weird feeling then. But she brushed it off with that smile she always used when she was hiding something behind her teeth. I didn't press her. I thought I was being paranoid. Turns out, I wasn't paranoid enough. Sophia had started pulling away before the surgery. Less touch, less eye contact, but more tears. Crocodile tears. The kind that came with whispered lines. Like, "No matter what happens, you'll always be the love of my life." I'd held her hand thinking I was the one dying. But apparently, I was just the one being replaced. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't ask the nurse to call anyone. I just lay there, blinking at the screen, letting the betrayal wash over me like anesthesia wearing off. Numb, then sharper, then clarity. Because what Darren and Sophia didn't know was that while they were preparing their vows, I'd been preparing a contingency plan. I didn't know why, but I had this instinct to give power of attorney to Deborah, not Darren. Deborah, my legal consultant from the hospital board. Someone who didn't owe me friendship or love, just a clear code of ethics. She had my accounts, my house keys, even my shares. I told her, "Only act if I don't wake up." She agreed, but now I was awake. I smiled to myself and tapped her number. When she answered, her voice cracked. "John, my God, you're awake. I need you to do something," I said quietly. "Don't ask why. Just move everything out of my name." She paused, sensing the shift in my tone. "All right. Just say the word," and I did. As I ended the call, another message popped up. From Ryan, just one line. "You weren't supposed to wake up." I stared at it for a moment, then I smiled again. Because I wasn't going to crash their honeymoon, I was going to crash their entire foundation, not in rage, not in noise, but in silence. Because I was alive, and I remembered everything. My name's John, 32. Trauma surgeon turned trauma patient. And up until 2 weeks ago, I thought I was going to die on the operating table. I wasn't the kind of man who left anything to chance. My entire life had been about control, about assessing risk and eliminating chaos. I made a career out of predicting how fast blood could drain from the body and how quickly you needed to act to stop it. I had cut open rib cages and clamped arteries faster than some people tie their shoes. But when it came to my own failing heart, I was completely powerless. I had been diagnosed with cardiomyopathy a year earlier. Progressive, invasive, a ticking clock with no visible timer. I'd pushed off the surgery 3 times. Not because I was scared, but because the people I trusted told me I wasn't ready yet. Sophia, my fiancée, told me she couldn't handle losing me so soon. Ryan, my best friend and fellow surgeon, said the surgical team still needed to prepare. The hospital wanted to transfer me to a different city. Logistics, delays, but in reality, it was all noise. The clock was always ticking, and I ignored it because I trusted them. Sophia had been with me for 4 years. We met at a medical fundraiser, where she was organizing PR for the foundation. She had this disarming confidence, the kind that makes people lean in when she talks. Everyone thought we were perfect together. She had charm, elegance, and ambition. I had a quiet mind and a careful heart. We never fought. We built routines, planned futures, made promises. She moved into my apartment 6 months after we met, and filled every inch of it with her presence: lavender candles, white roses, framed photos of beach vacations, and matching SCR, UBS. Ryan had been in my life longer than anyone else. We grew up 2 blocks apart, played high school basketball together, went through med school side by side. I was the quiet one, he was the storm. But when I needed someone to be my witness, my emergency contact, the keeper of my private files, he was the first name I wrote down. And why wouldn't I? Ryan had stayed at my bedside when I collapsed 2 months earlier. He'd been the one who called the ambulance, the one who carried Sophia in when she nearly passed out from crying. He even told me, when the time comes, I'll be there. And he was. Just not in the way I expected. 2 weeks ago, I signed the surgical consent form. Sophia kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'll be here when you wake up." Ryan squeezed my shoulder and said, "I'll make sure nothing falls apart while you're under." And then I was rolled away, pushed down a hallway I had walked through 100 times before, as a doctor, not a patient. The lights above me blurred into a tunnel. My pulse beat slow and steady. And then, just like that, everything faded. To black. I was supposed to wake up to recovery, instead. I woke up to betrayal. The images I found on my phone weren't just random updates. They were proof. Sophia in a wedding dress. Ryan in a white tux. Holding hands, standing under the same arch I had designed months ago for our postponed wedding. The date and time matched the hour I went into surgery. Not after, not before. The exact hour. They didn't wait for a miracle. They planned for a funeral, and then they replaced it with a honeymoon. But here's the part that changed everything. This wasn't a heat-of-a-moment decision. It wasn't emotional confusion or misplaced grief. It was deliberate, coordinated. Ruthless. A week before the surgery, Sophia had started withdrawing money from our joint account. Not large amounts, but steady. Enough to raise flags I didn't notice at the time. She also scheduled multiple calls with Ryan outside the hospital. Calls she told me were foundation-related. Ryan, on the other hand, had suddenly cancelled the cardiology board review we were working on together, saying he needed family time. I should have known. All the signs were there. But love doesn't read red flags as warnings. It paints over them with trust. What made it worse was that I remembered something I'd forgotten, until that moment. Something buried under paperwork and prescriptions. I had given Deborah power of attorney. Deborah was the hospital's legal compliance officer. She wasn't a friend, or a colleague I spent holidays with. She was sharp, ethical, and brutally honest. I remembered signing over temporary control of my estate. To her after a long conversation in her office about the hospital's liability forms. I said, "If something happens to me, I don't want anyone emotional making decisions." She replied, "Then you better pick someone with no emotional attachment to your outcome." We both laughed, but she agreed. I emailed her a folder titled Contingency, open only if necessary. I'd nearly forgotten, but she hadn't. When I woke up, the first person I called wasn't Sophia. It wasn't Ryan, it was Deborah. She answered in 2 rings. "John, I'm awake." A beat of silence. Then, "I already followed your instructions." All of them. She had pulled my investment accounts. Froze the joint credit line Sophia had opened without my knowledge. Moved the title of the apartment under a holding name I'd designated. Transferred shares from a tech partnership I had co-founded with Ryan into a silent trust, blocking his voting rights. She didn't ask questions, she executed. I wasn't just alive, I was armed, and they had no idea. Sophia was still posting like everything was normal. Her caption that day said, "When life takes one love away, sometimes another was waiting all along." Ryan commented, "To forever, no guilt." No guilt. That's what they thought. That no one would ever know what they did, because I wasn't supposed to wake up, but I did. And the first thing I did was remember who I was before them, not the man who needed saving. The man who made other people wish they hadn't crossed him. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a setup. And now, it was my turn to return the favor. The nurse slipped. She was adjusting my V4th line, humming quietly, unaware of what she'd just said out loud. "Your wife visited last night." In a wedding dress, I turned my head slowly. "Wife?" She paused, confused. Yes, she wore something white. People assumed she'd just gotten married. She stayed only a minute. I didn't respond. I waited until she left, then asked for my phone. She hesitated, said something about the family leaving instructions not to disturb me with messages, but I made it clear, I wanted it now. As soon as it was in my hand, I opened the lock screen. What stared back at me nearly stopped. The monitor beside me. Sophia, my fiancée, standing under a rose archway in a silk gown. Hand in hand with Ryan, my best man, my childhood friend. The man who knew my blood type, my passwords, and my surgical risk. Ryan was in a white tuxedo I'd seen him try on 2 weeks ago. He told me it was for a hospital gala, but it wasn, single quotes, it was for their wedding. The timestamp in the corner of the photo said it all. The same day as my operation, not a day before, not after. The exact hour I was under anesthesia, and the caption, "Forever," started while he was asleep. That line wasn't just cruel, it was intentional. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to be too weak to respond. They wanted the world to know their love started where mine was supposed to end. It wasn't a coincidence. It was choreography. And I was done playing the role of the sedated man they expected never to wake up. I stared at the photo for a long time, not in grief, not in disbelief, but in strategy. I closed the gallery and opened my contacts. First call. My attorney. She picked up on the second ring. "John, I'm awake," I said. "Secure the list. I want everything frozen now." I already initiated the first set of lockdowns, but I didn't know if I'm alive. That's all that matters. And Sophia. She got married yesterday. Not to me. There was a pause. She didn't ask questions. That's why I hired her. "I'll notify Deborah," she said. "Do it quietly." Already done. The second call was harder. Not emotionally legit. Ryan had wiped my direct access to certain group threads. But I'd kept one backdoor open, Sophia's old client thread. A campaign group chat from when she worked with Ryan's ex. That's how I reached him. Ryan's ghost of a past. Camille's ex-fiancée. I found his private contact and sent one sentence. They did it again. You in? Within 2 minutes, he responded, with a thumbs dash up. 2 hours later, he called me personally. John. Ryan married her yesterday. I know. He said. She posted it on the profile. She thinks I can't see. She left me under sedation and walked straight into vows. She did the same to me. Told me she needed space to think, then eloped with him 2 weeks later. I guess this is their thing. I'm not after revenge, I said. I'm after correction, same. And just like that, I had the first piece of my quiet response team. Ryan always liked control. He thought people were puzzle pieces he could move around. But he never understood the full game. He mistook kindness for permission, loyalty for silence, and weakness for a permanent condition. He forgot who I was before the sickness. I was the man who kept his world in balance. The man who signed his references, cleared his license paperwork. When he messed up, vouched for him when the board asked questions about his unfiled patient logs. I saved his career, and he thanked me by taking the one person I trusted not to leave. Sophia had played her part too. Played it so convincingly, she cried beside my bed. She whispered that she'd wait. She held my hand with a diamond on her finger and told me I was her miracle. But in the background, she was planning a different kind of miracle. A transfer of affection. A rebranding. A wedding under the guise of tragedy. And the worst part, they assumed I'd never come back. They thought I would die before I could notice, or maybe they hoped I would, but I didn't. I woke up. And I remembered everything. They didn't know that while they were out buying rings and champagne, I had given my attorney a folder titled Failsafe. They didn't know that Deborah, sharp and silent, had already set up trust accounts and asset protection plans in case of sudden incapacitation. They didn't know that my shares in our joint project were never actually joint. The intellectual property had been signed under my cousin's holding company. Ryan had nothing. He'd built his house of cards on a surgical bed, he thought. Was going to become my grave, and Sophia, she had no prenup protection, because we were never officially married. The ring was a promise, not a contract. So the apartment, still mined the car. Also mined the press campaign she planned to launch after my death. I called her agent personally, and cancelled it. He was surprised, but Sophia said, I'm still alive, I said calmly. And you're not authorized to use my name or image. He apologized. That was the second domino. The third came when Ryan walked into the hospital the next day and saw me sitting upright in the chair. No monitors, no oxygen mask, just me, breathing. He froze. Our eyes met across the corridor. He opened his mouth. I raised a hand. No words. He stopped walking. I stood. You know what today is? I asked. He blinked. It's the day after your honeymoon, and the beginning of mine. With who? I smiled. Justice. He tried to speak again, but I walked past him, not in rage, not in hatred, but with clarity, because I wasn't broken. I was back, and I had already started writing the end of their story. I didn't show up in a tux, I didn't bring chaos, I walked into their post-wedding celebration, in a grey wool coat, no tie, no fanfare, just a clean shirt, polished shoes, and the silence of a man who no longer had anything to prove. It was a rooftop venue, warm lights strung overhead, guests sipping from crystal flutes, laughter, clinking glasses, curated joy. And then it changed like a room-shifting temperature when someone turned, saw me, and stuttered, "Isn't that?" Ryan saw me first. He froze mid-sentence, wine halfway to his lips. Sophia turned a second later. Her face, powdered and poised, cracked, for just a moment. She dropped her champagne flute. It shattered like the illusions they'd spent months building. I kept walking straight through the center of the celebration. No hesitation, no apology. The crowd parted like water. Some guests whispered, others stared. A few raised their phones, instinctively thinking it was part of the drama. Sophia probably orchestrated for her next post. I stepped up to the microphone near the DJ booth, took a breath, then said, calmly, to the bride and groom, your marriage lasts longer than your guilt. Gasps echoed. A woman dropped her clutch. The music died, mid-beat. Ryan took a step forward. John, what are you? I raised a hand. Just one, he stopped. The weight of the moment didn't come from shouting, it came from how quiet I was. I reached into my coat and pulled out an envelope. Walked over to him. Ryan, I said. He hesitated. This is for you. He didn't take it at first. So I placed it in his breast pocket myself. Effective immediately. You are terminated from the board of Westbridge Cardiac Associates, I said clearly, for the room to hear. All voting shares and assets have been reassigned under Clause 4B, due to breach of fiduciary trust. What? He muttered, eyes wide. You can't. I can, I said. Because I drafted Clause 4B. He tried to laugh, but it died before it reached his throat. You're not serious. I was never clearer. He opened the envelope. A clean termination letter, notarized. Beside it, a legal release form already stamped by our attorney. Sophia stepped forward then. John, please don't do this here. I turned to her, reached into the small black gift bag in my other hand. This is for you. She stared at it like it was radioactive. What is it? A reminder. She didn't move, so I set it on the table beside the wedding cake. Then I opened it for her inside. The engagement ring she had returned to me 6 months ago with tears in her eyes, saying she couldn't bear to marry someone who might die on her. The same ring she pawned quietly and bought back once she found out I survived. And beneath it, a document. She pulled it out slowly. What is this? Transfer of ownership, I said. Of what? Your influencer brand, I replied. Sophia. Living. Her eyes snapped up. I bought out the silent partners. Then I acquired the debt. Then I offered to restructure. The board voted. I now own 70% of it. She blinked hard. You're lying. You can call Deborah to confirm. No. She hissed, stepping forward. You can't do this to me. That's my face, my name, it was I said, until the board decided your face had public image risk. She shook her head. This is revenge. No, I said. This is a mirror. I leaned in just enough that only she could hear the next part. Every post you made about healing, about supporting me through my illness, it's now owned by the company. I own the rights to all of it, including the monetized reel you filmed crying at my bedside. You remember the one with the candle and piano music? Her hands trembled. Ryan looked between us, bewildered. You bought her company. I didn't buy it, I said. I took it back. With interest. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then a reporter who had slipped into the event, without anyone noticing, probably tipped off by the noise, raised her phone. John, are you confirming the rumors that you were betrayed during surgery? Glanced at Sophia, then Ryan, then back at the reporter. I'm confirming, I said, that betrayal doesn't end someone's life, it just starts a new chapter. Gasps again. Some applauded. One of the guests near the cake table said under her breath, this is better than any show on TV. I turned to leave. Ryan followed. John, wait. Just wait. You were in a coma. You don't understand. I spun fast. I understand everything. I loved her, he said, breath shallow. She needed something you couldn't give you. Meantime, his jaw clenched. You mean stability? A heart that wasn't failing. Because I gave all of that, Ryan. You just waited until it got hard, and then you cashed in. It wasn't like that. She visited me in a wedding dress, I snapped. And you married her the hour I was under anesthesia. You think I don't understand? He had no words. He just stared, then said, "We made a mistake." I nodded. "You did." Then I walked past him. Sophia didn't follow. She stood there clutching her contract, watching her curated empire slide out of her hands. No audience, no control, no plan B, because I was her plan B, and she burned it for a man who thought love came with a cosign and an exit strategy. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button. Before the doors closed, Deborah called. "All done," she said. "Everything in motion, everything good." I looked in the mirrored panel inside the lift. My reflection stared back. Clear eyes, calm face, no rage, no regret, just readiness. Because this wasn't revenge, it was accountability. And I had only just begun. That night, Sophia called not to apologize, not even to explain. She was crying. Breath hitching, voice raw like she'd been rehearsing grief in the mirror and couldn't get it to land convincingly. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered. I stayed silent. Let her fill the air with her own shame. Ryan and we didn't plan for this, not really. I didn't think you were going to make it. John, you were slipping. Everyone said so, even the doctors were bracing for it. Still, I said nothing. She choked on a sob. He was there. You weren't. I was scared. I was alone. He stepped in. So you married him. She didn't respond. I leaned back in my chair, holding the phone like it was the last fragile connection between what was and what would never be again. You stood next to my best friend, in the dress you once picked with me. You toasted forever. On the day I went under a knife. And now you're calling. Why, Sophia? She sniffled. Because I thought it would be different. Because I didn't know how much it would hurt. You didn't know how much what would hurt. Seeing you walk into that rooftop like nothing had touched you. Like you weren't broken. Like you didn't feel anything. My fingers clenched slightly around the edge of my desk. I felt everything, I said. I felt it all when I saw your wedding photos, with the caption you wrote. Forever started while he was asleep. She went quiet. You wrote that, knowing I was alive. I didn't know it would go viral, she whispered. It was just a line. Don't write lines like that unless you mean them. She paused. Then came the moment she stopped trying to lie. You were going to die anyway, John, she said. We just moved on first. That sentence didn't sting, it detonated. I closed my eyes. Let the words settle like ash. So that's what I was to her. A countdown, an expiration date. Something to be mourned early. So the tears would dry in time for new vows. She expected silence. I gave her something else. Then why are you still calling a dead man? She didn't answer. The line clicked. She hung up. And in that instant, everything inside me realigned, not out of rage, out of resolve, because the pain no longer cut. It calcified, turned cold and useful. I opened the drawer beside me. Inside was the journal Deborah had gifted me the week after I regained full consciousness. It was black leather, unmarked. She said it might help to write. I hadn't touched it, until now, on the first page, I wrote, You were going to die anyway. I underlined it. Twice, then beneath it, they planned a future on the ruins of a man they hoped would never wake. I flipped the page. What happens when the ghost comes back alive? Then I kept writing. Every appointment, they rescheduled. Without my knowledge, every shared asset Ryan tried to convert into his name. Every hint of premeditation, betrayal, strategy, masked as sympathy, Deborah called mid-sentence. I saw her post, she said. Already. It was up for 8 minutes before she deleted it. Something about losing control of the narrative. Good, let her spiral. What do you want next, John? I looked at my window. Rain had started. Slow, rhythmic. I want her to understand what it means to be invisible. Deborah hesitated. Meaning, I want her shadow banned from her own spotlight. Every brand deal, every renewal, every PR opportunity that leans on my recovery story, cancel them. Quietly, no drama, no public backlash, just silence. Deborah nodded through the line. Consider it done, and Ryan. Already discredited from our circles. One of the firms already pulled out of his next pitch. I smiled faintly, and Deborah. One more thing. Yeah, find me a ghostwriter. She paused. For what? A memoir. Another pause then, softly. Title. I looked down at the journal again, read the words aloud. He was going to die anyway. Deborah exhaled. You'll burn everything with that. Not burn, I said. Illuminate. I went back to work. New hospital, new city, new mindset. No welcome back banners, no interviews. Just a new name on a badge. Elias Grant, my middle name, plus my mother's surname. Let them think I was a quiet transfer from out of state. No one connected me to John, the man they left behind, sedated. Forgotten. I didn't want revenge headlines. I wanted silence. I wanted control. And I found it in a non-profit wing of the hospital, one run by a woman named Deborah. She wasn't glamorous like Sophia, or loud like Ryan. Deborah moved with purpose, spoke with data, and carried 3 phones in one hand, like weapons. Her foundation helped fund urgent surgeries for uninsured patients. And she ran it like a war front. We didn't speak for the first week. The second week, she caught me rerouting a donor email to her underfunded department. You're not in admin, she said. I know. Then why'd you step in? Because no kid should die waiting for adults to balance columns. She studied me a moment. You a martyr? No, just someone who knows what it feels like to die slow. She didn't ask further. Over the next month, I quietly funneled resources toward her foundation. Anonymous donors. Private contacts from a past I no longer claimed. When she found out, she walked into the break room and handed me a sealed envelope. What's this? Transparency. Financial breakdown. In case you plan on rescuing us further. We sat on the rooftop 2 nights later. She lit a cigarette and offered me one. I declined. So John, she said, casually. Or should I say, Ilias, I didn't flinch. You ran facial recognition. No, I saw your hand tremble during a pediatric case last week. Not because of nerves, but because of muscle rehab. So I looked into who you were. Do you care? No, she said. Just wanted to know what kind of ghost I was working with. I chuckled. You're not afraid I'll bring scandal. I'm not Sophia, and I'm not here for clout. That was the night I realized Deborah wasn't just building a foundation. She was surviving something too. A week later, she told me about her past. About how Ryan, her ex, had bankrupted her during his wedding week. Stole her donor list. Accused her of fraud in the press. Walked away smiling. I didn't ask how she survived, because I knew she did. I'd in single quotes. She just kept walking like the floor wouldn't collapse. That's how we started, healing side by side. No romance, no pity. Just 2 broken professionals rebuilding. Something bigger than revenge. Together, we restructured the entire donor model. I brought in luxury branding. She brought in forgotten field surgeons. I redesigned pitch decks. She cold-called ambassadors at midnight. Every day we worked. I found a piece of John coming back, the one Sophia buried under vows she never meant. One afternoon, she asked me straight, "What happens when she finds out you're alive?" She won't, but if she does, then she realized I was never the one who needed saving. The next day, a PR email hit my burner account. Sophia had posted a video crying in her studio, vague tweeting about someone who misled the world with silence. She was unraveling, and I didn't lift a finger. "Want me to hit back?" Deborah asked. "No," I said, "I want her to watch me thrive in silence." That evening, we got 5 new donor confirmations. She looked at me from across the boardroom. "You know what this means?" "Yeah," I said. "It means everything they used to own, the sympathy, the spotlight, the moral upper hand, we just reclaimed it." And in that moment, I didn't see Deborah as a backup to a broken love story. I saw her as the answer to it. 1 year later, the headlines were all about Sophia and Ryan again. But this time, they were being hailed as visionary disruptors in the medical media tech space. Their new startup promised to revolutionize the way patients engage with healthcare: transparency and narrative control. It was flashy, overproduced, and exactly the kind of thing Sophia excelled at. Branding pain without ever owning it. Ryan did the back end, or pretended to. Sophia did the camera-facing lies. They posted couple portraits, white lab coats, sterile offices, faux empathy. Pinned tweets with quotes like "healing others begins with honesty." I nearly laughed, but instead, I kept quiet. Let them gather sponsors, let them rally investors, let them take interviews, schedule launch events, film glossy teaser trailers with rising violin scores. I didn't need to stop them, I just needed them to walk to the edge themselves, because they didn't know what I'd been doing that year. They didn't know that while they were speaking about innovation, Deborah and I were acquiring all the tools they'd built their foundation upon. The startup tech, purchased via shell companies and quietly licensed to Deborah's foundation under a humanitarian clause. The influencer engagement engine they used for outreach. That was a dormant property I'd personally co-developed 4 years ago, before I got sick, and I had let it sit idle in a holding company, just in case I ever needed leverage again. The sponsors they counted on for headline partnerships. Every single one of them had originally pledged through me back when Sophia stood beside me, posing as the faithful partner. They didn't know, but they were about to. The night before their grand launch, Deborah and I sat across from each other. In the quiet of our shared office, her sipping tea, me reviewing the trigger sequence on my laptop. "You sure?" she asked. "No rage," I said. "No spotlight, just the truth. You're not even going to attend." "Oh, I'll be there." I smiled. "I just won't be sitting in the audience." At exactly 7:14 p.m., the venue's system glitched. The projected opening montage filled with footage of Sophia and Ryan in surgical masks, fake mentoring scenes, and fabricated origin stories, flickered, and then stopped entirely. Then, the lights dimmed, the crowd whispered, and a new presentation began to play. It wasn't theirs, it was Deborah's. A clean, subdued video rolled, showing children saved through her foundation. Footage of rural clinics rebuilt. Testimonials of patients who never knew who funded their treatment until now. As the room sat in confusion, Sophia ran backstage. She found me standing there, calm in a navy suit, arms folded. Ryan stood behind her, jaw tight. "You ... What did you do?" she whispered. I tilted my head slightly. "You've been building a legacy with borrowed bricks," I said. "You just forgot to check who owned the land." She reached for her phone. "Don't bother calling the sponsors," I added. "They've all pulled out." Quietly, professionally. Some of them are on our advisory board now. Ryan's voice cracked. You hacked us. No, I said, amused. I outlived your attention span. Sophia stepped closer. You planned this. I smiled at her, not cruelly, not angrily, just with finality. No, I said. I just healed faster than you hoped. That's when the event manager walked up and handed them a new schedule. The venue has been rebooked, he said. The launch is now a charity gala under new ownership. Sophia's lips trembled. You're behind this, she whispered. No. I corrected. I own this. I walked past her then. Past the very aisle where she once married Ryan in my absence. Past the stage where she once stood on my shoulders and waved to the crowd. I left the building. Let them explain it to themselves. Let the PR team work overtime. Let the news cycle do what it does. Deborah found me outside, under a canopy near the street. The evening breeze soft against the collar of her coat. Well, she said, that went smoother than I expected. They'll spin it. They'll call it sabotage. And we won't answer, she replied. Exactly. She reached into her coat pocket and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a folded note card. It read, To John O, one saw your story coming, because they all assumed you died. I had this printed weeks ago, she said. Just in case. You forgot, I smiled faintly. I didn't forget. I just wanted to be quiet, long enough for them to forget me. And now. I looked up at the night sky. Now I begin. Back home, I pulled out the old journal, the one Deborah gave me when I first arrived. Back when I was hiding under an alias, afraid of mirrors, I turned to the last page and wrote. Some stories don't end in explosions, some end in quiet exits. And ownership papers. Then I closed it and put it away for good. I never pressed charges. Not against Sophia, not against Ryan, not even civil suits, not one press release, not one public takedown, no headlines, no interviews. No John returns from betrayal, stronger than ever. Redemption arcs, because sometimes the most devastating sound is silence. And that silence was louder than anything I could have said. Their startup dissolved in 3 months. Investors pulled out. Sponsorships vanished. Infouencer. Partners deleted photos overnight, suddenly re-evaluating past affiliations. Sophia tried to post a tearful explanation, but the comments weren't forgiving this time. Even her signature phrase, "Forever started while he was asleep," got turned into a meme. Ryan tried to salvage what he could. Went solo, failed harder. Burned contacts I already owned. They crumbled without me lifting a single hand. I still live quietly, same city, different name, legally restored. I work 3 days a week at a trauma center that doesn't care who I used to be. 4 nights a week. I volunteer for the foundation Deborah rebuilt. We don't do it for optics. We don't post stories. We just help. Once a young man came in, bleeding out from a car wreck. He looked like me 10 years ago. Full of fire and trust and big plans. I stayed beside him through the night. No cameras. No write-ups, just presence. That's what matters now. Deborah and I still don't label what we are. There's no relationship status, no declarations of love, no forced coupling, just ... companionship, alignment, mutual survival. Sometimes, we walk to the clinic together, in silence. Other times, she drops her hand into mine when crossing a street. No words exchanged. She doesn't ask about Sophia anymore, and I don't ask about Ryan, because those names no longer feel like part of the life we're living. They feel like a book that ended 3 volumes ago, but there's one thing that keeps. Arriving. Letters, from Sophia. Always handwritten, always unmarked, always unsigned. I never open them. They sit in a locked drawer in my stacked, neatly like a grave made of paper. Deborah saw them once while cleaning. She didn't ask questions, she just said, "That's heavier than it looks," and walked away. She's right. There's a kind of weight that lingers in things unsaid, but I don't need closure anymore. Don't need to read apologies that arrive too late. Sometimes people ask me if I ever got revenge. I tell them no, because revenge is loud. What I found was quieter. I found peace, not the kind you post, the kind that lets you sleep. I saw Sophia once. Briefly. She was at a conference I wasn't supposed to attend, but got called to at the last minute. She didn't speak. She looked older, hollow behind the eyes, wearing a smile that didn't quite fit her face anymore. I nodded once across the room. She flinched. I didn't stop walking. I don't carry anger now, just memory. Enough to stay careful, enough to stay kind, but not stupid. Deborah sometimes teases me when I zone out too long. Says I look like I'm counting invisible scars. Maybe I am, but I'm not bleeding anymore. That's the difference. Last week, we opened a new wing at the clinic. Deborah stood beside me for the ribbon cutting. She wore the same coat she wore the night we cancelled Sophia's launch gala. Still stitched, still solid. Afterward, she leaned over and said, "You know what this wing means, right?" I nodded. "It means you didn't just survive betrayal," she said. "You outgrew it. And that's the thing. Some betrayals don't deserve closure. They don't deserve a final scene, or a sit-down, or a well-worded exchange of understanding. They deserve silence, distance, and the peace that comes when you finally stop needing to explain why you walked away.